The family of a local teenager says she never would have left home without calling.
Just praying for the best. I want my daughter home, man. And if she can't come home, I just want to know where she's at.
These posters around the towns of Livermore and Jay beg anyone with information to come forward. Posters that Richard puts up every spring, never losing hope.
Tell me what happened to my daughter. Just look me in the eyes so I can see her.
An arrest in a nearly 4-decade-old cold case. Thanks to cutting-edge DNA technology, the arrest happening exactly 39 years to the day
when Parabon Nanolabs used that sample to create 3D models of the suspected killer's face.
It's heartbreaking. We miss her, and we're going to find her. We're going to keep looking till we do.
It's like a never-ending nightmare. It doesn't end. It keeps returning and coming back.
What if I told you that back in the summer of 1970, 3 young men, 15, 17, 19, jumped the border into the U.S. from Canada, got into a fist fight at a Dairy Queen, got a ride from a stranger to a nondescript part of the highway, set up camp on an active train track, and fell asleep side by side between the rails. They slept so deeply that 2 hours after the sun rose, they didn't wake up to the sound of a train whistle or the rumble of the train bearing down on them.
The train's engineer never saw the 3 try to get out of the way or even flinch as the engine passed over them. What if I told you that within 4 hours the case was closed, it was considered a tragic accident? Not once was foul play even considered, and the thought was vehemently opposed. 3 young men, 3 boys, were shipped back to their families with no questions answered.
Welcome back to another episode of Locating the Lost, Season 1, Episode 2, The Cape Breton Boys on the Track. Tonight we're speaking with Lorne Novak, the older brother of one of the victims, Kenny Novak.
Okay, I appreciate you taking the time to listen to my story, and maybe we can do something together with it.
Well, we appreciate you taking the time to tell us your story.
Okay. Like I said to Travis, I want to probably focus in on the lack of police investigation on that accident.
Yeah,
Right.
There seems to be an awful lot of it.
It seems to be quite a problem down there in Maine from what I've been reading online.
Yeah, it is. Absolutely.
And you saw the letter that Mandora sent me apologizing for what he said to the other guy.
Yeah, I posted that earlier today. That's unbelievable.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, but that was, mind you, that was 30 years after the accident, right?
All right,
I got that letter from him in 2010, but I'll explain that as we go through.
All right.
Okay.
Can you describe what life was like back then in 1970?
Life back in 1970, because we were influenced because we lived so close to the United States, of course, 500 miles away. It was a bit of a hippie era.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
There was lots of acid and pot going around and stuff like that, and everybody was into concerts and partying and whatnot. It was a lot different than it is today. Okay, the story starts the week before July 9th, 1970. My mother drove my brother and Terry Burt to a popular beach site called Ingonish, which is about an hour and a half from my hometown of Sydney, Nova Scotia, on supposed to be a 10-day, 2-week camping trip.
Mm-hmm.
While at Ingonish, they met another individual by the name of David Burrows, who we all know each other. I mean, we come from a small town, like 30,000 people, so we knew each other. On July 11th, my mother was visited by the Royal Canadian Mounted Police asking questions about where her younger son, Kenny, was at. She was under the impression that he was in Ingonish Beach, camping.
Mm-hmm.
The officer returned about 4 hours later and said no, he was found dead on the train tracks in Holton, Maine, Oakfield, Maine.
So the officers came to your home. Can you describe that? Were you there when they showed up?
No, I wasn't home at the time when the officer showed up.
And now you were 17 at the time, right?
I was 17 at the time, yeah.
Now, had they invited you to go along with them, or did you just have your own things you were doing?
No, I was with my own friends in Ontario at the time. I didn't even know he went camping. I was already long gone.
Oh, yeah. So how did you find out? Your mom call you, or?
Well, we had a phone call at my brother's place shortly afterward from another brother saying that our mother phoned him and told him that Kenny was killed.
I can't even imagine.
The general consensus from one, and it still is the general consensus from the people that I hung around with and grew up with, it was no accident.
How long had they been gone? You said they were going for a camping trip?
They were going to Ingonish for 10 days to 2 weeks. And David Burrows convinced them, from what I gather from the information I've received over the years, to make a trip down to Boston, Massachusetts to meet a couple of girls they met in Ingonish.
Now, how old were the boys at this time?
Terry Burt was 19, David Burrows was 17, and Kenny Novak was 15.
And did they didn't make it, obviously, to Boston, right? Their first stop was through Maine?
Yeah, they jumped the border in a place called, I could pronounce it wrong, Hogston, which is just a burb of Holton, Maine.
Mm-hmm.
They jumped the border there at about 10 o'clock at night. At that time, they met another individual by the name of Royden Hunt, who drove them down to Highway 2 and the I-95 where the train tracks cross. And apparently they walked, from what Royden Hunt has told me, they walked down the train tracks, and that's the last he's seen of them.
So he was the last person to see them that we know of, right?
That's right.
So I heard a story about possibly a fist fight or something that they were involved with when they were down there. Did you hear that?
I didn't hear that. What's up?
There was a fist fight with another kid, I guess, or an argument happened.
Apparently there was a fight at the Dairy Queen, or at the ice cream parlor in Holton. That's never been confirmed, but that is a rumor that's been going around.
And no one really knows what it was about, if it even happened at all.
No one. The problem with this story is Sheriff Crandall, within 15 minutes, the investigation was done. Mm-hmm. He was convinced it was just a tragic accident. He washed his hands from it. He had the autopsy done. He had all parents or all fathers show up in Holton, Maine, claim the bodies, and get them out of the States as quick as possible.
So what supposedly had happened that night anyways? What was the official report from the time they got into Maine?
The official report from the police?
Yeah.
There is no official report. We've never heard anything. All Crandall told us was that it's just an accident, and that's the way it is.
Now, what did they tell everyone had happened, though? What was the
official story was that they fell asleep on the train tracks and the train ran over. That's right. The story.
And it sounds pretty nonsensical, though, right? Because there was 3 of them, essentially, young men who the train had come by, at 7 in the morning?
7 o'clock in the morning, 2 hours and 10 minutes after sunup.
Right, after sunup. With some kids that were, out on an adventure, essentially. Like, they're not really going to want to miss a lot of time.
No, they're running from the Border Patrol at the time.
Oh, right.
When I was at the accident scene, and you can look at it on Google Earth, there's a field right beside those train tracks.
Mm-hmm.
With an entrance off the old I-95 to that field. I asked Crandall's deputy if they actually walked up into the field looking for tire tracks and whatnot. And the answer I got from his deputy is, why bother?
Wow.
And the other weird part about all of this, right, is not only just sleeping on the train tracks, but like they were in their sleeping bags. And
we don't know if they're actually in the sleeping bags or the sleeping bags were just laying on top of them because of the condition of
that's what I was going to ask you.
Right.
We're in. I mean, I never saw any pictures. I never saw any police report. I saw nothing.
Yeah. But the engineer, or the train engineer, had claimed that he, as soon as he saw something, realized it was sleeping bags, he let off the horn and hit the brakes, right? Like, trains make a lot of noise. There's no way those boys would have slept through it.
The train decibels on the horn are 125 decibels, which is louder than a rock concert.
Right.
That train let the whistle go at the crossing, which is less than a quarter mile away from where they were found.
And that was before he even noticed them, right?
Before he even noticed them, he let that whistle go at Timothy Road crossing.
Okay.
And then another less than a quarter mile later, at 150 feet, when he came around the bend, he saw what he thought was a rubber raft on the tracks.
Well, I can tell you, Lorne, that if I was a young man sleeping on the tracks, I'd keep my ears peeled for a sound of a horn. How about you?
Well, I come from a steel city, steel coal mining area. We know trains. I mean,
right.
You enter that city from any direction, you have to cross train tracks. You had great respect for a train. We knew people that were killed on trains prior and lost arms and legs, and so we always had great respect for a train.
Now, the other part that I found kind of odd about all this is they had claimed that, you know, the boys might not have known exactly what they're doing, or, you know, that they decided to sleep on the tracks. But the guy, was it Terry Burt? Now, he's the one that they actually originally identified them from, right? Because his name was on the sleeping bag.
That's correct.
To me, someone who puts their name on their sleeping bag is someone who probably uses it a fair amount, who probably wouldn't decide to sleep on railroad tracks, maybe find a shelter out in the woods, per se.
That's right. That's right. And how David Burrows was identified, it was from a note that he had from his girlfriend in Sydney by the name of Margie Burke. That's how they identified David Burrows.
Right, and then they tracked her down, right, to ask who she had given that note to?
They tracked Margie. The RCMP went to Margie Burke, asked her about the note, and she said she sent it to David Burrows.
So then...
That's how it was identified. Of course, Kenny was identified through Terry.
Because they hung out together.
Because they hung out together. He was the last one identified, yeah. The older people accepted Crandall's story.
Right. Respect authority,
nothing
right?
About it sounds like an accident at all. You would have to assume that the kids were extremely incompetent, but I'm not assuming that's the case. Obviously,
I'm assuming that they thought they were just dumb hippies.
Right. And that was part of the time too, right? I remember reading something or hearing something that during that time, like, people really didn't like hippies, and maybe especially a border jumping hippie.
Well, another problem was that Crandall also looked at the fact that they were Canadians, and he was not interested.
Right.
Do you have any idea how long Crandall was working as an officer at that point?
I think about 15 years prior to that. He was deputy.
Wow.
So he had the experience, not like a rookie officer out there just making a judgment call. He had the experience to look at a situation, try to deduce what took place.
He did have the experience to some degree. I don't know if he was quite competent enough to handle something that big.
Right.
He did write my mother, and my mother did write him a few letters until she passed away, and he said he always wondered what actually happened himself. He actually lived in Oakfield. He lived about 2 miles from the accident scene.
Oh, wow. It makes you wonder how many times he walked down the tracks and looked at it.
And I know that talking to people in Oakfield over the years, through Facebook, of course, that Crandall always wondered what happened.
Yet he blew it off as an accident.
At first.
Right
and then I think his conscience got to him after a while.
Right.
And also the people in Oakfield, Maine were pressing him for information and to solve the case, and he couldn't solve it.
So tell me about that morning. I understand that they had no restrictions on that area, right? They just let townspeople walk in and look around and...
Well, the train crew notified the previous train crew they had an accident. Of course, all the previous train crew came up, and Oakfield's such a small little place of, I think, 750 people. News traveled fast, and the town showed up to have a look at some people. Quite a few people showed up at the accident scene to have a look at it. And Crandall didn't stop them.
So there's no preservation of anything there, I guess. Any evidence?
Of any evidence that could be there.
Right.
It was trampled over.
Now, there was some other weird stuff about it too, right? Like the boys, between the three of them, had a little over $6 on them. And there was a bunch of envelopes strewn around too, right?
That's right.
Now, why would a couple boys planning on spending 10 days out in a different country only have $6 on them?
Well, that's an interesting question, because I've been told by one or two other people that they had over $800 on them.
Really?
And the monies just seemed to have disappeared. One of the reasons they were going to the States was to buy some acid and bring it back to Canada.
Okay.
And that didn't happen. And where that $800 went, I have no idea.
Right, or it did potentially happen, but
it just disappeared. Whether somebody picked it up or it was gone before they were found, I don't know.
Potentially it could be motive. Well,
Maine at the time was a drop-off center for drugs from Canada being flown in and dropped off, and people would pick them up. And I always looked at that theory too, that maybe they stumbled into a drug drop-off, and they're done in, and of course the train tracks are right there beside the field, and they're dragged down the bank and put on the train tracks and destroyed the evidence.
Yeah, and the sleeping bags would make sense too, because dragging a body is not easy. If they were killed beforehand, it would make a lot more sense to drag them in a sleeping bag.
Yes, of course it would. Especially if there's more than one person.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there would have to be more than one person to accomplish that feat.
Right.
Looking at the autopsy reports, they weighed about between 125 and 135 pounds apiece. They weren't big kids.
No.
But still, dragging someone from, any distance, even over 40 feet, will get tiring.
Yeah, it would be. But, I mean, they got dropped off shortly before 11 o'clock. The train hit them at 7. You had lots of time to drag a body.
Mm-hmm. It's weird, too, that was the place chosen, like, at the tracks. Like, first, on both sides, why a person who would want to get rid of the bodies would put them on the tracks, or why they would want to sleep there. None of that really makes a whole lot of sense. Although, well, maybe not, though, right? With that sharp corner.
Unless you're covering up a crime.
Yeah.
Unless they're covering up evidence, yeah. If you look at the autopsy reports, I did post them, you'll notice that the bodies, especially the head area, was quite destroyed.
Right.
So, and the lack of blood in the bodies was another thing that spurred my interest.
Lack of blood in the bodies?
Well, the bodies didn't have a lot of blood in them, and there wasn't a lot of blood on the ground, from what I'm told.
Right, almost like something happened somewhere else and they were placed there.
Yeah.
I also read that 2 of the 3 had, they noted pale kidneys, which I guess is lack of blood as well, right?
Lack of blood, yeah.
Can that happen post-mortem, or is that something that has to happen before death?
I don't know. I'm not a pathologist.
No.
I can't answer that question. What I can answer is, can say there was never core temperature was never taken.
Yeah, that seems pretty basic.
Oh, right.
I mean, the bodies were just picked up and they assumed they died then and there in the spot, but the autopsies were performed the next day at Dunn Funeral Home in Holton.
And that's the other thing. This happened on Friday, and how soon were those bodies sent back to Canada? Was it by Monday, I believe?
We had the bodies by Sunday night.
Jeez.
That seems awfully quick.
In a sealed casket.
And that's autopsy, quote unquote, paper processing for, the incident.
For 3 people.
For 3 people. And it was all handled that quickly.
In the funeral home.
Wow.
Not at the hospital.
So I know
the bodies were transported from the accident scene directly to the funeral home.
So I talked to you before, and you had mentioned about the paperwork. Was the paperwork still at the funeral home up until just a few years ago or something?
2010, I decided to, because of computers and getting a little bit more proficient in them, I decided to start having... It started out I wanted to put a plaque at the accident scene.
Yeah.
I contacted the Aroostook County Commissioner, and he gave me all kinds of reasons why I can't do it. He then contacted Sheriff Jim Monroe, said, look, you got to get this guy off my case because he wants to put a plaque where these 3 boys were killed in 1970. Speaking with Jim, he called me and emailed back and forth a couple times to Jim Monroe. And that's when I got the email sent to me by mistake saying this should be the end of a problem. But he didn't say Mr. Novak, he said Novak. On the letter, he did say Mr.
And who was that addressed to? Who was he sending that to?
As addressed to Doug Boudreau, the commissioner of the Aroostook County.
Okay. Yeah, that seems fairly insensitive to say something like that.
That my interest a little bit, and that's why I started looking a little bit deeper. I didn't find out the deaths were never registered in Maine until 2010.
And this happened, July 10th, 1970?
Yes.
So
40 years.
40 years the
40
deaths were
years.
never registered.
That just seems so unbelievable to me.
That's bizarre.
Yeah.
And pushing Jim Monroe to go to the funeral home to pick up those autopsy reports, unsigned autopsy reports.
Wow.
And it was even in the autopsy report that said there was, or one of the reports, right, where it said there was a significant lack of blood at the crime scene.
Yeah.
And they still were very vehement about there not being any foul play involved.
That's right. They also found no drugs and no alcohol, no barbiturates in their system.
Right.
Yes, that's a good point.
Nothing in their system. Not even any food.
Hmm.
So, I mean, I believe the toxology reports. I believe that. The gentleman that did the autopsies was probably in the 70s now. He may have missed something.
Mm-hmm.
But to get 3 bodies out of the States back into a foreign country with no death certificate raised my eyebrows too.
Yeah, how does that take place?
Yeah,
that took place because the 3 fathers identified the bodies and Sheriff Crandall let them go.
Oh, man.
It was total incompetence on part of Sheriff Crandall. I mean,
Right.
He appeared to be a nice guy. He was very friendly when I was there and remorseful. And reading his obituary in the paper through the computer, he's done a lot of good for the Holton area. But I've also heard some things that he was not all that great.
Yeah.
And this is a case in point. I think he screwed up, for lack of a better word.
Yeah. It seems so weird that, I don't know, just all of it. All of it seems weird. Them being on the tracks, them claiming that there was no foul play, like all the extra stuff. Like, why would a couple kids be down there with only $6 in their pocket, a bunch of extra, sleeping on train tracks, a bunch of envelopes around, letting civilians walk around on the premises of a scene of a death?
A tragic death, yeah. And he actually worked for B&A Railroad before he became sheriff.
So he would have known what, more or less what to do and what to look for, you'd think.
You would think. I mean, I don't know how long he worked for Bangor Aristocrat Railroad, but...
What about his deputies that was there? Did any of them ever say anything to anyone or question anything?
I talked to one of the deputies. I got his name written down here somewhere. All three of them are dead now.
Right.
And I did talk to one deputy if he went up on the bank and had to look for tire tracks or evidence up there, and he simply said to me, why bother? Just a little, maybe a 10-foot bank you had to climb up to have a look. And they didn't clean the scene up. I mean, there were still pieces of paper and sleeping bag material still spread on the tracks. A month later.
Wow.
And I said, why isn't this cleaned up? And they said, well, we're supposed to pick up every piece.
Yeah.
I said, no, maybe you should have washed it. And another thing that got me going, when they took us to the accident scene, they put me in a separate car from my parents with a deputy. I didn't drive from Holton, Maine to Oakfield with Crandall. I went with one of his deputies.
Why would that be? What do you think the reason would be for that?
I think Crandall wanted to say something to my parents, or wanted to hear something from my parents.
Oh, okay.
Another strange thing is that they found a U.S. Army button off a jacket. I don't remember the three boys having a U.S. Army jacket button or anything else in my life.
And they found that at the scene of the...
They found that at the scene, yeah.
Yeah.
They gave it to my father. He said he didn't want it.
Yeah, I don't blame him.
Right, who wants a souvenir, right? It's kind of a little insensitive.
I wouldn't want it either. But, like I say, Crandall, and 4 hours later, of course, it's on the wire, and he's getting phone calls from newspaper guys, and he's all saying then that it was just an accident. Holton's a very small town, as you know. It's probably maybe 7,000 people, if I remember correctly.
Right.
Oakfield, again, it's 750 people, not many. And the Oakfield Train Museum has no information on that accident, which I find kind of strange.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's a little weird.
They can't remember the accident. And I've had other people look into it, newspaper people and private individuals, and they're going to get me all this information, and as soon as after that, it stops. I get no information from them at all.
Yeah, I don't know what it is with this state. It's almost like I don't know if it's cover up or just covering up from their bad mistakes and their incompetencies.
I contacted Darrell Crandall Jr., who was assistant police chief of Holton. He never answered me back. He's now head of DEA in Maine.
Oh, he is?
Or northern Maine, I guess, yeah. He never answered me back. And neither has Mandor or the new sheriff. They're telling me that the courthouse in Holton had been remodeled 3 or 4 times since 1970. And that some of the police reports were done in paper or in pencil, and they got water damaged. I can't see him doing a police report in pencil.
Right.
I can't believe that they lost an accident report where 3 people were killed.
Not only that, 3 kids. They were kids.
And from a different country. Like, all of it is just so absurd.
The RCMP have no reports on it. Internal Affairs Canada has no reports on it. They didn't even know about it.
Swept under the rug.
It's all swept under the rug.
Can you talk to us about Kenny?
Sure. It's Kenny was a smart kid. He was actually taken Latin in school in 7, 8, and 9. Long hair, granny glasses, a bit of a John Lennon-looking guy, short, 5'6", 5'7", brownish blonde hair, thin, typical teenager at the time.
Now you guys all kind of hung around with the age group was like 15 to 20, right?
Yeah, we all hung around the same groups. We went to the same dances and stuff like that. I didn't know Terry Burt. He was a new kid on the block. Another thing I find out strange about Terry Burt is that he had a motorcycle. So he had a driver's license, yet he didn't have his wallet on him. They never found any wallet.
And it wasn't at his house either, right?
Wasn't at his house either, no. It disappeared. That's bizarre. So, that's basically the story. I mean, it's kind of strange that they don't even want to look for they told me they looked, but I don't think they looked for the files. I think the files, if they are available, are still in the Holton courthouse.
Mm-hmm.
Upstairs in the attic or downstairs in the basement, they're somewhere.
It's too bad they won't let you come and help them look for it, you know?
They won't let me in there.
No, I know.
I feel like I've heard that story before, though, about doing remodels and stuff getting water damage. I don't know if it's from another event that's happened in Maine or if it's a line from a movie, but it seems really like almost cliche, like a really bad excuse.
Well, I think the whole thing is, what they're telling me is a big, either an excuse or a lie.
Yeah.
I think they don't really want to look into it anymore because it is getting on to 50 years ago.
They just want you to go away.
I'll tell you another little story. In I'm guessing 87 or 88, I was living in Ontario, and I got a phone call from a gentleman from the White Rock, Arkansas police. And he told me at that time that they're investigating about 9 to 10 other incidents where people were killed on the same way in the train track in Eastern Seaboard.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. I've heard the story about the 2 boys in Alabama that were found.
Yeah, they actually caught that guy.
Yeah.
But they don't know if he's telling the truth or not. But this detective from White Rock, Arkansas, was asking me what I thought of Sheriff Crandall, which I thought was kind of a strange question to ask.
Oh.
Whether he's trying to point out the incompetence of Crandall doing the investigation or Crandall being involved in the actual scene, I don't know.
Yeah, that's bizarre.
Yeah, that takes a like a mystery movie turn right there, doesn't it?
Someone should almost write a book or do a movie about this.
Yeah.
Yeah, they really should.
But and we never really got any of the personal belongings back after the accident either.
Oh, you got nothing back?
Nothing. A dead body.
Yeah.
In a U.S. Army sealed casket. Gray metal sealed casket. That was it.
Yeah, that's horrible.
And I don't think we ever even got a bill from the funeral home. I think the state of Maine picked that up.
Oh, they probably didn't want anyone coming back for any reason.
When I was there, I was under the impression that Crandall didn't want us there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we'll cover the bill for you guys so we don't have to worry about ever talking to you again.
That's right.
Don't ask questions.
And do your grieving and leave me alone because I'm too busy.
Right.
Wow.
Sad. And I did talk to the brakeman who has since passed away. He lived in Oakfield, and he told me, he said there was no movement from those boys on that track.
So what was his gut feeling?
They were dead before the train hit them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that seems to be the reasonable assumption from most people would be that.
And why Crandall didn't go and talk to Royden Hunt later, I can't understand that either.
Was that the gentleman that dropped them off?
Yeah. He never went back to talk to Royden Hunt.
Or check out his vehicle.
Or check out his car. Royden told me the boys had grass in the back, but that's from jumping the border and their feet got wet.
Now, what was he like
they had
when you
grass
spoke?
on their back? Is that what you just said?
I said they had grass on their clothing, and they were wet. Their feet were wet. So there must have been a creek they went through or water of some sort. I've also checked out the weather for July 9th in Oakfield, Maine. It showered in the daytime, but it didn't rain at night. And
that kind of ruins their story, doesn't it? That they had their faces covered to avoid the rain, or the reason why they're on the tracks in the first place, because it was supposedly more dry than the ground around it.
And like I say, all three of them are from Sydney. We've seen trains every day.
Mm-hmm.
And that one was 19 boxcars long and one engine. Sad.
So what was his demeanor like when you spoke to him?
Randall?
No, the
Royden Hunt?
Royden Hunt.
Royden Hunt's in his 70s now, 78. The gentleman that was with him worked at the Irving gas station at the intersection of Highway 2 and 95. He has since passed away. I've heard stories about Royden from other people. Some good, some bad. That he was quite the character when he was in his teenage years.
Mm-hmm.
He has a car lot. He sells cars in somewhere outside Oakfield. Smith Falls or Smyrna Falls or whatever it's called.
Smyrna Falls.
Yeah, he has a car dealership there. He seemed very nice. He did say to me if I ever wanted to call him back to give him a call. He was happy to hear from me.
So it didn't appear to you that he was necessarily trying to hide anything.
It's kind of hard to get a feeling in someone when you just talk to them on the phone for 10 minutes, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So, no, I think that 95% of the people never felt it was an accident.
Yeah, I think you'd have to have something wrong in your head or be trying to hide something.
Yeah. It's easier for me now, 50 years later, to speak about it, right?
Right.
Right.
I mean, for the first 10 years, I was pretty well much in shock and in denial myself. But after getting that email from that sheriff saying this is the end of the problems with Novak, it got my back up.
Right. Well, you just started some more problems, right?
Yeah. And that led me to the death certificates and whatnot.
So, and now these are just rumors, but what are some of the rumors you did hear as you're growing up?
On after the accident?
Yeah.
Well, we were all 17 and 18 at the time, and everybody was saying it was no accident. There's something else involved that we don't know about. I'm the last surviving family member that's been at that accident scene. And I went back there 2 years ago and did speak to a couple of people in Oakfield, and they can't even remember.
Yeah.
That's kind of why we want to do this, is try to get these cases back out in the public eye.
Somebody doesn't want it in the public eye. I think what they're trying to do, in all honesty, is to save the reputation of Senior Darrell Crandall, is what they're trying to do.
At the expense of closure for family members.
They don't want his reputation tarnished.
Yeah.
Which is sad. My gut feeling, a drug drop that went bad and they got caught up in it.
Yeah, I mean, anything is more plausible than they fell asleep and didn't wake up on the train tracks.
I think they walked down the train tracks. I don't think the bodies were dragged at all. I think they were walking down the train tracks and stumbled into a couple of guys and they killed them and put them on the train track.
Yeah.
And to put three people in between the tracks, that must have been a tough... If they were sleeping, the train tracks are 4 foot 11 inches wide. You get three people laying side by side in 4 foot 11 is pretty tough.
They'd have
so
to be
they
stacked.
they weren't in a line, right? Yeah, they were all beside each other on the train,
side by side. Crandall's explanation was they're just trying to keep warm.
Oh, jeez.
If you're in a sleeping bag, you don't need to be laying beside someone to keep warm.
Right.
In July.
In July. I mean, it doesn't make sense, and there's no tarp over them to protect them from the rain. All there was sleeping bags. If it was raining that bad, they're going to get wet.
Yeah. What?
So go lay under a tree.
Shoulder to shoulder, how wide do you think a 15, 17, 19-year-old kid are going to be? I mean, they must be, 2.5 feet, maybe?
Yeah, at least, yeah. So you have to stack them.
You must have been stacked one on top of the other.
Exactly.
Yeah. Unless they're all on their side, and that's the only other way. But
it doesn't add up. Fortunately, Crandall passed away in 97.
So no more getting any information out of him.
Or the two deputies. One was killed later in the 70s, car accident. And the other one died just shortly in 2017, I believe.
Oh, wow.
And the new sheriff, I wrote him, he never wrote me back. I even wrote the DA, he never wrote me back.
I had read somewhere something about when after Hunt left for the boys that Border Patrol showed up at the ice cream stand or something, like within 10 minutes behind him.
The Border Grumpy was his name. His nickname. Shortly after the accident, he got transferred to Texas.
Well, that's odd. Or coincidental.
For some reason, he wasn't liked by the locals, from what I'm told. At that time, it was, of course, long before 9/11, so the border was pretty much wide open.
Right.
He missed the boys at the ice cream parlor by 10 minutes. Not long.
Yeah, so that timing's weird, too. So he's 10 minutes behind the vehicle that took off for the kids.
Yeah.
How far away from the ice cream stand is the railroad tracks? Where they dropped off?
Royden said he had them in the car for 20 minutes.
Oh, so that's a good haul.
It is. Yeah.
I'm guessing probably 7 or 8 miles. He said that, and Royden also told me they had a roll of cash on them.
Yeah, they were showing him the cash?
Royden said they're in the back seat and they're talking, and Royden said they were counting their money. Now, it doesn't take long to count $6, but Royden said there's a lot more than $6 there.
Yeah.
Something else that Crandall should have found out.
Oh, yeah, it was an open shut case for him.
It was open and shut in 15 minutes after him being there.
Yeah, he must have had plans that weekend.
Yeah, he had a bowling tournament or something, right?
Maybe missing his family barbecue or something.
Yeah, Jesus.
He was a very tall man. I mean, I'm 6'4", and I remember him looking me eye to eye. And just seeing another hippie as far as he was concerned. My father liked the man very much. My mother, in all honesty, it took 13 years to kill her, but it did kill her.
Yeah.
Her younger son.
Mm-hmm.
And another one that was paralyzed at the same time. So that's pretty rough on my mother.
Now, how many kids were in your family?
7.
Holy.
He was the youngest of the 7. I'm the second youngest. So it was tough for me to go to town after that accident without people coming up, without my friends coming up to me and reminding me all the time, right? That was no accident. That was no accident.
Yeah, you didn't really have to be reminded.
How you look, 17, you don't know who to ask, right?
Right.
Yeah.
That's a problem. And 50 years later, nobody really wants to get involved in looking into it much after 50 years. There's an old saying that if you die 50 years later, no one remembers you. The problem with me is I never forget.
And you shouldn't.
And sometimes I think I'm disturbing their death, right, by digging into it, but I think it has to be done.
Well, yeah, this definitely doesn't seem like just an accident. Someone is at fault here, and, an answer would be nice.
Yeah, those boys deserve justice.
Right.
I just think what I'm trying to do, in all honesty, is prevent a lack of investigation happening again.
Yep.
Yeah.
You know, I don't want another family or another couple families to go through what 3 families went through this time. And
Yeah, that can cause more heartache than anything, is a family just sitting there with questions for 40, 50 years, 20, even 10, 20 years. It doesn't matter. Like, not having an answer.
Not having an answer. I even wrote the governor, and he never wrote me back.
I think 40, 50 years ago, it's easier to get away with taking shortcuts and not doing your job, and now there's a lot more follow-up.
Well, I think the people are more apt to chase the police to get things done because of things like computers and cell phones and people taking pictures and information and evidence. And I think 50 years ago, we didn't have that technology or any way of doing that. Even the B&A railroad records are non-existing.
Yeah, that's so weird.
I mean, there should be records somewhere, but no one wants to relinquish or look for them. That's the problem.
Right.
I even looked into getting a private investigator. That didn't work.
No, what happened there?
There are some, in the last couple of years, there are some newspaper stories about it again, spurring some more interest. And of course, I started a Facebook page looking for information or people from Holton to contact me, and we got 350 people in there. They want to know what happened.
Right.
But nobody seems to want to. Any official doesn't want to get involved.
There's got to be something out there. There's got to be some information somewhere. Someone knows something, you know.
Somebody knows something. But they're not talking. Either that or they're dead.
Yeah.
I mean, I realize 50 years is a long time to be looking into something, but something like this is never too late, right?
Right.
So, Lorne, was this an accident or is this murder?
You asked me that question?
Yeah.
Murder.
I'm inclined to agree with you.
Sad situation, but it took me a long time to admit that. I wanted to admit the fact that they actually just fall asleep on the tracks. But as I got older, and it's something I don't think about every day, but it's something that's always there.
Yeah.
And as people get older and pass away, that information's gone or whatever. Some family members have told me, leave them alone, they're dead.
Yeah, that's not right.
No, if that happened to one of my brothers, that would be an unacceptable answer.
I'm the youngest, so I sometimes have to listen to my older brothers and sisters. Right? I'm the new baby of the family.
Right. Oh.
But I appreciate what you guys are doing, not only for me, but for other people that you're looking into the matter as well.
Yeah, I mean...
Yeah, hopefully we get something out of this for somebody, a little bit of closure.
Well, you guys are just south of Bangor, correct?
Yeah, about an hour from Bangor.
Yeah, I never made it down that far. I only made it to Bangor.
It's not much south.
No, there's not a whole lot. Between Portland and Bangor, it's a lot of empty.
Well, I'm in British Columbia right now, where I'm living now. We all got the water and trees.
Yeah, that's where I live too. Well, not there, but that same sort of environment.
So what made you move out that way?
You know, I'm almost to the end where I've exhausted all my avenues to look into it, you know? Other than going to the courthouse, but I don't think the courthouse will interest me any. I always thought after 50 years they would give you that information. I always thought after 50 years in the United States, the Privacy Act would no longer follow and they'd give you any information you wanted. But that's not true in this case. I
don't even know if it's 50. I could be completely wrong, but I thought it was a lot less than that.
No. I don't know. I could be wrong too. It's kind of hard for me to figure out how the American justice system works with your police. You got state police, you got city police, you got this police, you got the FBI.
Yeah, sheriffs and
Border Patrol, game wardens.
We have the RCMP.
Yeah, there's a lot of branches.
Yeah, we have the RCMP and that's it. But they're not even answering me in my letters.
Have you, and I don't know how your government works up there by any means, but have you tried to reach out to one of your representatives or anything to see if they can help with this?
I've gone after my MPs, my member of parliament. I've gone after the External Affairs Canada. They don't answer me back. They just either draw and says this guy's off the wall, or we're not interested because no one says anything.
Well, I don't think you're off the wall. I think you're right on track.
I think what I'm trying to do is to find someone that's been around, right? That's 70 years old that knows something.
Yeah, and it gets harder with every day, right?
And that's why we got that Facebook called Searching for Answers, and hopefully somebody will stumble into it one day and say, well, I know something.
Right.
So I'm not sure of this, but most towns have their own Facebook page. I'm sure Holton must have one. You maybe try to join that Facebook page and start sharing your story.
I've done the Holton, I've done Oakfield.
Oh, yeah.
I've reached out, and I've gotten some people that give me information which may be true, maybe. I've had one guy that says he lived 2 miles away from the train track, and he heard that whistle that morning. 2 miles. And they woke him up from his sleep. I mean, that train must have been making a lot of noise for that 150 feet.
Absolutely.
Well, and you know, living in a town where there's a lot of trains anyways, is you can feel a train coming from, a quarter mile away at least.
Miles away sometimes.
Right, like that. It just, especially if you're right on the tracks, that thing's going to be shaking you right out of your frickin' socks.
Yeah, it'll be waking you up, especially at 7 o'clock in the morning.
And yet, not a single one of them even flinched.
And not a movement. Not a movement.
Well, if you had anything to say to anyone that has any information, if you had a message for them, what would you say?
If somebody called me up and told me they have information that's valid, and they know something about somebody, I think I'd be on a plane the next day to talk to the person. Not to talk to them on the phone.
Mm-hmm.
But no one's saying anything to me. Other than when I spoke to the brakeman and read the newspapers. I've approached the Kerry Museum in Holton. They got no information either.
So are your siblings, are they connected to this case like the way you are, or are they...
No.
Just kind of let it be?
They're all relying on me to find something out. There's only 3 of us left, and I guess I'm the only guy proficient enough or sane enough to look into it. I want to spend the time doing it. I'm semi-retired now, but I'm still working fairly regular. So, I mean, I've got people from Cape Breton that told me that keep looking.
Yeah.
Turn up someday. There's days go by that I sit here by myself and my wife is at work that I just look through the computers for newspaper stories or something. Even the National Rail Board in the United States has no information on it. Part of the problem is that Crandall didn't have jurisdiction on the railroad line. That falls under state police.
I didn't realize that.
And Crandall didn't contact the state police 2 days later, after the bodies were returned to Canada. I mean, it's too bad that Crandall Jr. doesn't go up and talk to Royden Hunt himself. Sheriff Crandall's son, he won't do it, or hasn't done it.
Right.
The woman running the Oakfield Train Museum, she's the one still digging for information and sending it to me once in a while.
Well, at least you got someone helping, right?
Connie Bartlett is her name, the curator of that museum. So for a museum not to have any information when it happened 2 or 3 miles from the museum there's something going on.
Yeah.
But I'll keep looking, keep digging. Hopefully before I'm gone, I'll find something out.
Yeah, and hopefully someone might hear about your story too, right? And
yeah, well, you guys are doing a couple stories, I'm told. You got another podcast out there, right?
Yep. Yeah, we're going to do a bunch of stories of missing people and starting out in the state of Maine, missing people and unsolved murders, then eventually expanding on out of state.
Well, apparently there's some law passed in there that they want some of these cold cases reopened again. I don't know what that's all about.
Yeah, the main cold case squad, they just passed a bill to fund the main cold case squad, but even that is a couple of detectives that are doing it kind of on the side.
Well, that's what it was. Is they were going to pay extra or something like that for 2 detectives to work on stuff in their spare time. So there still isn't going to be fully dedicated to it, but something's better than nothing, I guess.
My wife was laughing at that statement. Spare time. A detective shouldn't have any spare time.
Right.
But I just think there needs to be a shake-up down there, in a place like Maine. I realize Maine is probably, back in the 70s, was pretty redneck.
It's still kind of redneck. But there's no excuse for bad police work or not looking into stuff thoroughly.
Well, I also think because the boys were Canadian, it might take a back bench,
Right.
And I think that's the angle that Daryl Crandall Jr. or Sr. was looking at it. They're Canadians, and we're not going to waste their time.
Yeah, they're not ours. They're hippies. They're out here doing something they probably shouldn't have been anyways. Ship them back.
I don't know what Crandall thought when that train engineer said there was no movement on the tracks. I don't know what he thought then. Whether he thought they were that dead asleep from hitchhiking for 2 days up to Bolton or not, I don't know. So we can't ask him. He's no longer with us either.
Right.
Yeah.
But that's the story, and like I say, that letter I got from Medora saying this is the end of her problems with Novak, that really got my curiosity going.
Yeah, as it would anyone.
Yeah.
Well, we appreciate your time, Lorne, and thank you for telling us your story.
I appreciate you phoning and talking to me.
All right. Thank you, Lorne. You have a good night.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye. We would like to thank Lorne Novak for sharing his brother's story. If you'd like to learn more about this case, join Lorne in his Facebook group, Searching for Answers. If you have more information about tonight's case, contact the Maine State Police at 1-800-452-4664.
Or reach out to us on our Facebook page at Locating the Lost. You can also leave us a voice message on Anchor FM. The link can also be found on our Facebook page. Thanks for listening.
Taylor Williams led investigators to Alabama this week.
So we have some breaking news from Florida. An arrest has been made in
Tonight,
connection.
after years of agony, a glimmer of hope for the family.
Investigators spent hours searching through this house off Pennsylvania Avenue.
What could be a major development in the search for missing Alabama teenager.
Tonight, a stunning twist in the search for Taylor.
Somebody out there knows something.
They want to lay him to rest their way, not by somebody else's way.